right now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to get inside of the big story of the morning. And let me just tell you, the Jamaica Labour Party, the JLP, has accused the People's National Party, the PNP, of political mischief making for questioning the results of the recent general election, particularly in the constituency of St. Andrew West Central. The PNP is contemplating filing a case with the constituted authority alleging irregularities in the election process. However, the JLP asserts that no reports of irregularities were made to the designated authorities, and Prime Minister Andrew Holness's margin of victory is consistent with past elections. The JLP won 35 seats in the general election, while the PNP secured 28. PNP's concern about the election results have been dismissed by the JLP as baseless and frivolous. The JLP has urged the PNP to provide evidence to support their claims or retract their statements. This morning, a man we've interviewed several times before in the lead up to the general election is on with us to give his take and his party's take, and that is a member of the JLP Communications Task Force, Marlon Morgan. Good morning, Marlon. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Richard B. Good morning to your listeners, both here in Jamaica and over in the diaspora.
It was some would say a hard-fought electioneering campaign, but the JLP came through victorious. Are you satisfied with the results, Marlon, yourself?
Well, I share your view that it was quite an intense campaign and a keenly contested campaign, which is essentially good for this democracy of ours. What it means is that political players, persons like myself as, persons involved and candidates cannot sit on their laurels. They have to be kept on their toes because the vote and support of the Jamaican people ought not to be taken for granted. So I concur that it was keenly contested, but of course to the extent that I was one of the players and, supporters of the JLP, I am delighted with the outcome, the JLP having attained a majority of the seats in 35 constituencies, a majority of the votes rather in 35 constituencies, to the PNP's majority of votes in 28 of the seats.
Now, the PNP in a press conference yesterday basically were questioning some of the results, and I wanted to ask you, Marlon. You have described, your party has described these allegations as baseless and frivolous. What evidence do you have to support the claim that those are baseless comments made by the PNP?
That's an excellent question, Richard B., because the evidence we have is the PNP's own words, the PNP's own admission. At the press conference yesterday morning, the PNP's President Mark Golding indicated that what they are referring to are reports that they have gleaned from social media. So they have had no compelling, no further and better particulars, and indeed they have not provided any exhibits or evidence that would have been of such weight and moment that they would have transmitted it to the respective authorities, whether it is the EOJ, who is the competent authority in this matter, or observer missions such as the Organization of American States, the OAS observers, or CARICOM observers. So nothing has risen to the point, nothing has been documented or indeed packaged into evidentiary form by the PNP based on their own admission at their press conference yesterday. Yet they have come out and have been peddling innuendo, peddling supposition, and just stopping short, as it were, of using language that would outright bring our election into disrepute. The truth of the matter, Richard B., is that of the many things that have bedeviled Jamaica over the years, the conduct of our elections, the administration of elections in Jamaica is one of those aspects of our national life and national affairs that we can look on at proudly. We are the envy of many around the world and in the region in relation to just the maturity and how seamlessly we conduct elections, and governments are formed quite seamlessly. It is not always so in other parts of the world, even as we saw in recent years in the great United States. Yeah. So here in Jamaica, we're at a point where elections are, for the most part, free and fair and free from fear. And if there are any allegations of irregularity, there are appropriate channels and mechanisms to ventilate those and have them addressed, and to parade leaders of a political party at a press conference to just engage in innuendo and suppositions is quite frankly unfortunate. And that is why the persons from the JLP who attended upon our press conference last afternoon dismissed as baseless and reckless what the PNP started at their press conference early on Thursday.
Yes, the PNP seemed to have zeroed in or paid more attention, it seems, to the St. Andrew West Central constituency, which of course was won, as we have it, by Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Do you have any reports of irregularities that were made to any designated authority as it relates to the election in that constituency?
Richard B., the answer to that is an emphatic no. I do not have any such report, nor does the EOJ, certainly based on their last time of reporting, has any such report. The truth of the matter is that the St. Andrew West Central constituency is of some moment, because that's the constituency that the Prime Minister has the honor and the privilege of representing. Yeah. Now, one of the things that the listeners should appreciate, Richard B., is that when elections are contested, the boxes, the respective ballot boxes from the respective polling stations are essentially transported to what is called the counting center. Counting center is usually the designated space where the returning officer is situated, and they essentially do the count there. But what takes place on election night, Richard B., is what is called the preliminary count. So when we are watching TV on election night and we see some counts coming in, and you see reports of the number of ballot boxes so far in the count, one has to appreciate that first and foremost, those respective ballot boxes are coming from different parts of the constituency. And in West Central St. Andrew, it is not a garrison constituency. It is a constituency where the PNP enjoys considerable support in some areas. For example, in the Mall Road area, and they also enjoy support in the Mullines division, some places neighboring Waterhouse and so on. So they have a considerable block of support in that constituency. But to be clear, what we saw on election night were some votes coming in, largely from some of those areas, and it had the Prime Minister's opponent, Mr. Paul Buchanan, in the ascendancy at what point. But you have to pay attention to where those ballot boxes are coming in from. So by the time later in the evening, or as the evening wore on, Richard B., by the time the boxes that favor the Prime Minister from places like Seawood and other areas in the Stivright Gardens division or the Olympic division, by the time those boxes came in, the Prime Minister, as has been the case over several election cycles, would have attained the ascendancy and pulled away from his opponents such that he won in excess of 2,000 votes, as he typically does in elections. So for the PNP to be, they're saying that they have had reports about people being in line and not admitted to vote. And I gather there's only one person, based on a cafe report, there's only one person who argued that she was on the premises, but she was at the bathroom. Now, I don't know that a presiding officer would take that and attach any great weight to that, but there's just one person who had that allegation. So for the PNP to be pretending as though, or presenting a picture as though there were a raft of electors who were disenfranchised by way of being in the line as at 5 o'clock on election day, but yet not admitted to vote. I think it's just very unfortunate, and it does our democracy and our electoral system in terms of its reputation considerable disservice, Richard B.
And to add to that, I actually spoke with Mr. Glasspool Brown, the man at the helm at the
director of the EOJ,
yes, a couple of mornings ago, and he did say that they had no report of those claims, and that there were several polling stations that in fact opened until pretty late. I think he said up to 8 o'clock. So apparently that's not a major issue. However, with what the People's National Party said yesterday, I'm interested to find out from you, what is the JLP's stance on the PNP's decision to contemplate filing a case with the constituted authority, and what would that mean for the country?
So just to be very clear, the PNP is in its right to make determinations as it sees fit. First of all, we find it very curious that based on the PNP's own expose at its press conference yesterday morning, that the PNP is electing not to proceed with magisterial recounts in relation to those seats based on the margins that would have made sense for them to explore magisterial recounts. The PNP has indicated that based on the advice of their attorneys, the likelihood of those election outcomes being overturned are, fairly unlikely or slim, and therefore they are electing not to do so. On the question of constitutional redress, as it were, or seeking redress in relation to St. Andrew West Central, I think what is of considerable note, or what is to be noted, and what is of considerable moment, is the fact that the Prime Minister is the man on the bridge here. And so the PNP knows that the Prime Minister is a candidate who would have won his seat, as he did in this past election, quite handsomely and comfortably. So any such action is just an exercise in frivolity. It is baseless in our view, but it is their prerogative to, as any other Jamaican, whether the Prime Minister or Richie B or Marlon Morgan, it is their prerogative to advise their attorneys and instruct their attorneys as they see fit. Now, we are not going to be daunted by that. As you will appreciate, Richie B, based on the indication emerging from King's House and the office of the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness will be sworn in for a fourth time as Jamaica's Prime Minister. He is primus inter pares, first among equals. He is the proud and deserving leader of the great Jamaican Labour Party, and the people of Jamaica, having been called upon to render a verdict, they have rendered a verdict in favor of Andrew Holness and the JLP that he leads, and all of us as his supporters and team members look forward to him rightfully taking his place and being sworn in next Tuesday, and subsequently members of his government will be sworn sometime thereafter.
Okay. Many people are concerned whether or not we'll have sort of a constitutional conundrum facing us based on those statements from the PNP yesterday. As it is, as we speak, will the JLP seek to engage with the PNP and other stakeholders to resolve any of these concerns that are being put forward?
Well, based on the posturing and the positioning of the PNP at present, the business of engagement and mature and sober dialogue seems, like a fleeting possibility. That's my own assessment. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but I'm cautioning Jamaica and drawing Jamaica's attention to the players we are dealing with here. We are dealing with, as PNP General Secretary, a depraved gentleman named Dayton Campbell, and therefore, based on how opportunistic Mark Golding is as well and how expedient the PNP is, yes, you get no sense as to any sobriety or any maturity being even remotely possible. But just to be clear, what the PNP has been doing and this threat, as it were, of action vis-a-vis St. Andrew West Central is the clearest indication, in my view, Richie B, as to what the next 4 or 5 years will be like. You will see the PNP seeking to be hawkish. They will seek to upend. They will not be collaborative, in my view. At least I do not give them that kind of credit or that kind of, goodwill. They will have to prove me wrong, but I know my default position and how I will be treating with and approaching this Mark Golding, Dayton Campbell-led PNP, because we mustn't forget that these are the same guys who have said some very deplorable and unfortunate things during the campaign, and have given succor to some very deplorable and unfortunate things, such as Miranda Wellington's assertion that if a war, and Heather Miller Bennett's assertion that she have our man them and who switch are going to end up in a ditch.
All right, Marlon.
This PNP is a depraved bunch.
Well,
and I'm delighted, Richie B, that the people of Jamaica rejected them in no uncertain terms on Wednesday, September 3rd.